What I mostly have learned is in the beginning, just don't get impatient because it's going to come very slowly. You're going to have to think about it a lot. It's okay to not write many words at first because the first 1/4 of the book probably takes about 2/3 of the writing time.
Interesting.
And then it really starts to accelerate. And then you reach that point eventually where you feel like when you're having dialogue between a couple of main characters, it's almost like you're taking dictation because you're hearing it in your head as they would naturally speak. And at that point, I'm writing 5-6 hours a day. I'm really pushing hard. It's the last thing I think about when I go to bed. It's the first thing I think about when I get up. I wake up with ideas. I wake up with lines in my head, or I wake up in the middle of the night with lines and I have to get up and write them down or they'll be gone in the morning. It sort of takes possession of you the deeper you get into it.
Hey, I'm Jon.
I'm Cory.
And this is The Passage,
the podcast where authors break down their favorite pieces of writing,
taking you behind the scenes from the first spark of inspiration
to the final edit and everything in between.
Of the two of us, me and Cory is probably the bigger genre reader. But one thing I am a complete sucker for is spy novels. I don't know why, but anything set in the Cold War, Berlin, Moscow, the Balkans, any of it, I really love it. In my earlier life as a kind of vagabond traveler, I would often go to those sort of out of the way, crawling with spooks places to sort of soak up the vibes, but the vibes were never really there by the time I made it.
Right.
It was all gone. But I love the way a good spy novel can propel itself through kind of the conventions of the genre, the action, the intrigue, but at the same time can really cast a wider net over geopolitics, domestic affairs, technology, all kinds of stuff can sort of fit under that umbrella. In a way, they can smuggle depth with a swagger that literary fiction can't, or it doesn't seem interested in trying to do. Plus, I think some of the greatest heroes in our literature are spies caught in these webs of questionable loyalties, dubious aims, desperate situations. And, if there's a better metaphor for life, I don't know what it is than that. I think that if I were to ever try my hand at fiction, it might be in the spy genre. The only problem is I would have no idea where to start. The same cannot be said for our guest today, Dan Fesperman, who over the last 25 years has become a real modern master of the craft.
Thank you.
He's the author most recently of Pariah, a book that takes on cancel culture, the sort of quasi-fascist flirtations going on in Eastern Europe right now, and America's overt and covert role in all of that. It sounds serious, but it's actually a really funny book. He's written a dozen other critically acclaimed novels before that, and I'm super excited to talk to him today. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. And I love that you like all those. Spy novels have all those classic themes: loyalty, betrayal, who are you really, identity, because if you're posing as someone else, at what point do you really become that person more than who you were to begin with? So,
right. Dan, if you could sort of set up Pariah on a basic level for us, and then we'll hand it off to you to read the passage that you've selected.
Yeah, Pariah is about a disgraced comedian and congressman, not Al Franken, but he has run up. He's had some Me Too transgressions which have shown up, and his name is Hal Knight, and he's his own worst critic in some ways. He's, rather than being ticked off by this cancellation, he's kind of in agreement with it, and feels like he kind of sold out his career as well. But as it turns out, little known to him, he was a favorite comedian of a leader of a fictional Eastern European country, a lot like Hungary. And the president was a lot like Viktor Orban. But his name is Nikolai Horvats, who, it turned out, learned a lot of his English by watching Hal Knight's movies and comedy videos. So when he is sort of canceled out, President Horvats invites him over to be his personal guest. He doesn't see this, but the CIA does. And the CIA, which has had a run of bad luck there, secretly goes to him to recruit him to accept this invitation to spy for them. And and hilarity ensues, or so I hope. But it's very satirical. But in this scene I'm about to read, this brief little scene, Hal has just had his welcoming dinner where he's met the president, and the president said gushing thanks. And Hal's escort for the evening is a young, naive presidential aide who's new to his job named Pavel Lukov. The dinner has just ended. Pavel is very relieved because he was sure he would screw it up. But he's also unsettled because he has just heard in the course of cocktail conversation an unsettling rumor that his predecessor, a fellow named Kalinic, was actually fired because of a security crackdown by this very imposing head of internal security in Borovia named Branko Sarić. And so he's feeling a little worried about that. So the dinner is ended. He goes up to Hal. He says, I'll be right back. I've got to use the men's room. And so Sarić and Pavel end up being the characters in this brief scene. Pavel excused himself into the hallway, where he ducked into the door for the washroom. He was halfway to the urinals when he heard the door open behind him, followed by footsteps. A sidelong glance showed that it was Sarić, who stooped to pick up one of those rubber wedges that janitors use to hold open the door during cleaning. But Sarić jammed it beneath the door to hold it shut. They were locked in. Pavel, who felt as if he didn't dare move, much less unzip his trousers, watched as Sarić quickly checked all 3 stalls to make sure they were empty. Then, still without a word, Sarić stepped over to a sink where he unscrewed the cap of his orange water bottle, pulled out some sort of filter attachment with a plunger, and refilled the bottle. Pavel, who needed badly to pee, fidgeted as he watched this odd ritual. After filling the bottle, Sarić reinserted the filter plunger and pushed it to the bottom, the way you make coffee with a French press. Sarić screwed the top back on and eyed Pavel carefully. I suppose you think this is a foolish indulgence. I know that's what others say. No, not at all. They have the same attitude toward a lot of security precautions. Oh, that's harmless. Why bother? Of course, they said that about Kalinic as well. Sarić set the bottle onto the rim of the sink and faced Pavel from 10 feet away, like a sheriff in an American Western. Pavel crossed his feet and tried to hold it in, his bladder feeling like a water balloon that might burst at any moment. So what do you think? Sarić asked. Pavel cleared his throat. About what? The evening, and our American guest, the way he comported himself. I think it went well as could be expected. The president seemed to enjoy his company. Yes, I think that is correct. In that sense, it was a success. I'm glad to know that. I don't like him. Mr. Knight, he's an actor. They're paid to fool us. He's really more of a comedian. Even worse. Watch. By the end of the week, he'll have us laughing at ourselves. When people start doing that, they miss things, important things. Yes, well, maybe we could use a few laughs. Fine, then. Laugh your way through the entire week, but don't lose your focus, because you have a role to play, a job to do, for me. Sarić closed the distance between them and clamped a hand on Pavel's shoulder, the grip uncomfortably firm. Pavel had to shift his feet to hold his balance, even as he continued to concentrate on not peeing in his pants. I know that you were supposed to be his escort for certain events, but I am expanding your orders. You will accompany him everywhere, each day he is here. From breakfast onward, you will observe and listen to all he does, all he says. You will be a constant presence, his minder. I doubt he wants a minder. Besides, I have other duties this week for the president. I have cleared this with him. You will follow my instructions. He knows you're having me spy on his favorite funny man? He knows you will always be there for Hal Knight's protection and ours. Maybe I should take this up directly with the president. The grip tightened. You're, of course, free to do as you choose, just as your predecessor was. Pavel had no answer to that, other than to shift his feet again and tighten the muscles in his groin. You will carry out these duties with professional detachment. You will earn his trust, of course, but you will not become his friend or social companion. You will only be his shadow and our shield. Others will assist you in these duties, including me at certain times. What others? Assist me how? Those details are not important. All you need to know is that at the conclusion of each day, and only after you are certain that he has returned for good to the security of his quarters, you'll contact me, no matter what the hour, to deliver a full report, beginning this evening. And if you do not, then you can be sure that I will be in touch with you. Are we clear on this? Yes. And when I call, you will answer, not like this afternoon when you ignored me. The battery went dead. Sarić smiled as if to say that didn't even merit a reply. Then, after a hard thwack on the shoulder, he turned, walked to the door, kicked away the wedge, and disappeared into the corridor. Pavel drew a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Catching a glimpse of himself in the mirrors, he was dismayed to see the pale, drained face of a castaway, a lone man adrift on an angry sea. He stepped shakily to the urinal, unzipped, and waited. 5 seconds passed, then 20. He couldn't produce a single drop.
Dan, I was looking at a couple of reviews online, and a few of them mentioned that you read the audiobook and spoke very favorably of your performance, and having just experienced a little snippet of it myself, I have to agree.
Thanks.
When I first saw the passage, I just glanced at the last line and I thought, all right, well, this is another first for the show. I don't think anybody's read anything with peeing in it yet.
Yes, or a failure to pee, yeah.
But when I actually sat down to read it, I was like, yeah, this works. It's a cool mix in something that you could totally play in a very silly direction, but you don't. You play it relatively for suspense, and it caught me a little off guard that it worked. I really liked that passage. I guess... Why don't you just tell us, why did you choose this section?
Yeah, I wanted to set up the dynamic a little bit better between Pavel, this young, trying to please the president, even though in his family, his wife hates the president's politics, trying to set up his dynamic with Sarić, who is this imposing figure who has his, fingers in every pie and is keeping an eye on almost everyone. And as Pavel has learned earlier that evening. So I want to make him feel threatened and also complicate his role in being Hal Knight's escort. Who is he going to be loyal to? Having a good time with Hal and trying to please him, or trying to serve Sarić, who could do away with him or his job? And I did want to walk that line between sort of serious and funny. I mean, I think most of the book I tried to do that. And it was odd. I didn't set out originally that this was going to be funny, although I did realize that because I had a comedian as one of my main point of view characters, it was going to at least have to have an absurdist sort of view of the world and the events going on around him, because I think that's the way any good comedian sees the world. There's always a laugh there, no matter how dire or no matter how serious the circumstances. But once I decided to set it in a fictional country, that kind of opened me up in weird ways to more of a satirical outlook. I'm not quite sure why it was, but I did start to think about other satire that I've read, and it's often in fictional countries. Like if you think of Yves Lenoir and Scoop, it's set in a fictional African country where all of these British reporters, from Fleet Street congregate to try to cook up a war for the readers back home. Things like that. Absurdistan, that's the name of the country that Gary Steingart, used as his setting for extremely satirical novels. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe that just kind of makes it easier to be free and easy with that kind of attitude.
It unhooks you a little bit from a reality. You can draw from a bunch of different places.
Yeah, and also when I'm writing, I've got several books set in Berlin, and because I'd lived there for 3 years. But when you set things in real places, if you're going to have real bars, real restaurants, I make up a few places in those settings as well. But when you have a real one, you better get the street names right. And in Berlin, they change about every 20 years due to history. So you better have the maps from that era, and you better have all of that.
Dan, how
early into the process then, or how late into the process did it become funny? I'm curious to hear you say, because your main character is a comedian, so I would have thought from the get-go in your
Yeah.
mind, you were like, I think this is going to be a little bit on the lighter side compared to some of my other books. So at what point did it turn into that?
I think it just turned more in that direction. Like I said, I did realize with his POV, I was going to have to play it for a certain type of humor. But with the other characters, that's what surprised me, I think. Like with Pavel, the predicaments he gets himself into, or with Sarić, he's funny in certain ways because he's surprisingly inept in certain ways as well, mostly in regard to human interactions. He's just not very good at that. And then I have these figures from the United States come in. They're from a right-wing news organization, which is not called Fox, but which is easily recognizable. And anyway, that type of thing. So it all opened itself up to fun when I was writing all of those scenes.
Can you talk a little bit about trying to get that dialogue right and how you yourself determine if it's doing the job it needs to do?
It's all about rhythms, and you want it to be conversational. I find myself reading it aloud a lot, not just when I'm recording the audio books, but when I'm rereading the passages I've written. And if it feels stilted or unnatural, then I adjust it. So, yeah, it's that type of thing. Mostly the rhythms, yeah.
Did that take you a long time to develop? Is that something that you had a knack for immediately?
I think being a journalist helped because I'd done so many interviews with people and seen all the different ways of talking. You hear the way bureaucrats talk, the way soldiers talk, the way people in foreign countries who maybe haven't mastered English talk when they're speaking English, the way people in different areas talk in different regions. So it was good training. You learn to be a good eavesdropper as a journalist as well. And I've sort of become an eavesdropper and listening in on other conversations, and I'll hear certain phrases and I'll think that's an interesting way to state that kind of point of view. That would be a nice thing to use. So you have to absorb and learn how to kind of glom onto other people's types of conversations and recreate that.
Do you remember writing this specific passage? Where were you? How early or late into the draft was it? Did it come?
It would have been early.
Easy?
I write pretty chronologically with the book. Sometimes scenes will occur to me that are going to be much deeper in the book, and I'll sketch them out, but I won't really write them in granular detail yet because a lot of it will be subject to change depending on what happens organically before then. But so it was fairly early in the book when the character who grew the most in this book, when I first thought of this, Pavel was a pretty minor character. I did not intend to give him a point of view. He ended up with a point of view and sort of being the third main character because I just enjoyed his company. I liked the idea of, in a way, if you look at it, he's got the most to lose in this book. Hal can get out of the country if he screws up, he hopes. Maybe not. But Pavel is a citizen. He works for the president. If he screws up, man, he's got family, he's got children. So the stakes are pretty high for him. So I really warmed up to him in a hurry, and his role grew.
Can you tell us, Dan, when you were sitting down to write this scene, what was the general outline? Because I could imagine another writer sitting down. Well, I'll go back to it because it's a little funny, but I do think that it actually works. The having to pee and that kind of taking everything from a 7 to a 9 on the sort of tension scale. You've kind of got this overriding device that I would consider is actually really effective at making what might have been a less tense scene into an even more tense scene. Was that idea there from the beginning? And did you think of, was that just sort of an instinctual thing, or how do you arrive at something like that?
I arrived at it because I knew Pavel was going to go into the bathroom afterwards, and that's where Sarić would single him out. But then when I started thinking about it, I thought, boy, he's not going to have time to pee. So therefore, he's going to really be in this tough spot physically, where he's trying to hold it in and he's trying not to freak out at the same time because of what this imposing figure is saying to him. So that just kind of came to me organically as I was visualizing the scene. I'm thinking, wow, he's in a tough spot here.
You also have this great image of Sarić taking the door, the like rubber wedge,
the
and
rubber thing and jamming it in.
locking the door with it.
Yeah.
Have you seen that somewhere else? I don't think I've ever seen that, but
I don't think
it
I
works
have,
really well.
but it felt like, there usually aren't locks on those doors. So I thought,
Right.
well, how would Sarić assure that there was just the two of them? And it's like, well, you always see those in bathrooms. So he would just jam that in. And you get the idea from how surely and quickly he does it that this probably isn't the first time he's done that.
Right. There's a lot of confidence in that move, which does a lot of work. I mean, there's a couple things you set up really early in this passage that I think are really effective. There's the water bottle. There's these things that you're able to.
The water bottle is sort of like, the old quote about if you put a gun in the first scene, it better fire a shot at some point. The water bottle is kind of that device in this book. And it appears throughout the book as sort of something that makes Sarić at times look a little bit ridiculous, as he is aware of, as he said, and someone who is just ultra concerned about not only everyone's security, but his own, because he wants this ultra pure water. And so, that was a device that this was a good place to kind of show how it worked, to set it up for later.
You mentioned an outline a little earlier. Do you outline? This was a question I was also thinking about as I was thinking about this interview and spy novels in general. Do they have to be outlined to some degree because the plots are complicated and things need to come together at the right moment? Or can you just write them as any fiction writer would write? Start from the beginning and just see where it goes?
It's a little of both. And I do more outlining with some books, less with others. I did some outlining, but it was mostly to keep the 3 POV lines straight in sequence and to make sure I wasn't lingering too long on one before I let you know and got you back up to speed on what was happening with one of the other two. So, and when you're doing that and you have people in 2 different time zones, it gets a little tricky too, because you'll have someone calls someone else 9 hours time difference or 6 hours time difference, and you have to be aware of all that. So you outline for those purposes, and that you start doing little time signatures next to the scenes, just so you're not going to lose your way. I know where I want to end up generally with each of the characters, but I'm not at all sure how I'm going to get there.
How often or how long do you ruminate with this story, with an idea for a book in your head before you actually sit down to write?
It's more that I ruminate about who is this person? What are they like? What are their fears? What drives them? What are they trying to get out of life? How do they feel about the person they're working for? How do they feel about their family? I think a lot about the main characters. That's mostly where I spend all of my time. And I think about the plot too, but it's mostly in how it shapes these people who are driving the plot.
Yeah. So I assume the very first thing that you think of is, a comedian gets canceled, gets recruited for some overseas mission. But then it sounds to me like you have to wait until the comedian or whoever the main character is a fully fleshed human before you can actually sit down and start to draft.
Yeah. And I have to figure out where he's going to be in the beginning and how cut off has made himself from the rest of the world, and where would be a good place to do that. And my wife and I had been to Vieques, an island that's part of Puerto Rico, and we'd been there and the year before, and I thought, well, that would be a pretty good spot to put him in the off season as well, when it's not as crowded. So that's how I ended up setting him there to begin with.
Do you spitball with your wife in this sort of early stage? Do you say, "Hey, I got this idea, and let me bounce it off you. See what you think"?
No, I don't bounce it off anybody really until I've turned in maybe the first 100 pages to my agent and my publisher as a proposal, and then they might have some thoughts and say, "Okay, don't go too far in that direction. Make sure you shore up this character and stuff," and give me some advice so that I don't make a mistake right out of the block with any of these people. My wife is a writer as well, and she's a reporter, and she's very good at it. I keep these things very private while I'm working on them.
Sure.
No particular reason. That's just
okay. I was going to ask why. I mean, maybe it's just the ideas, I don't know, can percolate and flourish a little bit before you say them out loud. Once you say them out loud, you see them in a different way, it seems.
Yeah, that's probably part of it. And I'm still always working on it. So if I start talking about it, I might take it in the wrong direction. So.
Right. I feel like in the conversations Cory and I have had, asking fiction writers to explain where their ideas come from is very, very challenging. It seems to be
they come from everywhere. Yeah.
Very ephemeral thing that's hard to put your finger on. But I'm curious about the sort of Hungary-esque country that you set the book in. Where do you think that came from? Or is that just current events? And
I thought about setting in Hungary, but two things sort of got in the way. One, I didn't want to get sued. And
your publisher, when you sent in the first 100 pages, they were like, "Hold on."
Yeah, you can't say this about these people; they're real. And the other was I wanted to have more freedom to kind of lampoon it in a way too, and to exaggerate it in certain ways. And I didn't want to have to do a lot of research. I like doing research, and with a lot of my books, I do tons of it. But with this one, I didn't want to have to research the way that internal security works in Hungary right now. I wanted to set up my own security chief, my own security service, and make it exactly to fit the narrative need.
In some of your other books, you do go to those lengths in the sort of research process?
And I'll always return to those places. Like even if I set a book in Berlin, I'll go back to Berlin to kind of refresh myself on some sites I want to use, even though it's in a different era, things like that, and kind of just get into that whole German vibe that you have over there, and that whole Berlin vibe, which is pretty similar, even though it's no longer the Cold War. There's certain things about the city that have changed a lot. There's certain things that kind of remain evergreen. So, but we had lived over there just as they were coming out of the Cold War, so I have a good feel for that. So.
Good timing, if you think about it. As a spy novelist, you couldn't really ask for anything better.
No, it's my favorite city to write about. So I really had a great deal of fun setting up all the locations, the names, Bolrovia, which to me sounds like something that might have been in a Marx Brothers film.
Right.
I think they had Fredonia for one of them, and A Night at the Opera, and Blatsk, the capital. Which sounds like a substandard beer, but. It was great fun, throwing around all those Eastern European consonants and coming up with the names of the places, the different parts of the country, the history. I mean, there's a template for history of Eastern European countries. They all endured Hitler. They all endured Stalin. They all suffered in almost equal ways. Maybe they had beautiful capital cities that kind of survived because they kind of appeased Hitler or, appeased Stalin and fell easily. And so they weren't bombed to smithereens.
Did you have a little cheat sheet? Did you try to sort of map out, okay, here are the rules, here's the capital, here are all the things that I'm probably going to need to reference. I need to come up with a plausible, believable backstory?
Not really, because I'd been to so many of these. I've spent so much time in Prague and Vienna and Budapest and Berlin that, all of these cities have a river that runs through the center of them because of old navigation from long ago. They all have an old central part of the city with all these little windy cobbled streets and a lot of old buildings. They all have massive parks. They all have some part of the country where some horrible things happened, during the Second World War, including in the city. It was pretty easy to set that up. Yeah.
I want to sort of widen out a little bit. Talk us through your writing process, your routine. You sit down at the computer, you have an idea in your head. What does that look like day to day for you? And you've written so many books. You must have learned things over the years to maybe make the process easier, or I don't know if it gets easier, but.
What I mostly have learned is in the beginning, just don't get impatient because it's going to come very slowly. You're going to have to think about it a lot. Don't forge ahead too fast because you won't have the character quite ready yet for doing that. Do a lot more thinking. It's okay to not write many words at first because you're doing a lot of it in your head. And the first 1/4 of the book probably takes about 2/3 of the time. The writing time.
Interesting.
And then when I get to about the 1/3 mark, it really starts to accelerate. I know all the characters. I'm completely familiar with all of them. If you give them a situation or a line or something, that confronts them. You know exactly how they're going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And then you reach that point eventually where you feel like when you're having dialogue between a couple of main characters, it's almost like you're taking dictation because you're hearing it in your head as they would naturally speak. And at that point, I'm writing 5-6 hours a day. I'm really pushing hard. It's the last thing I think about when I go to bed. It's the first thing I think about when I get up. I wake up with ideas. I wake up with lines in my head, or I wake up in the middle of the night with lines and I have to get up and write them down or they'll be gone by morning. It sort of takes possession of you the deeper you get into it.
Do you have a routine? Do you write in the morning? Do you write right where you are right now? Are you flexible?
Yeah, I write where I am right now, and I start in the morning. Early in the book, I don't get started till about 9. As I get deeper into it, I might get started more like 8:30, and I'll break for lunch. I'll do the crossword. I'll take a nap. I've taken naps since I was in my early 20s, so it's not just an old man thing. It's something I need, that if I don't, I'll just sit here for a lost hour and a half, feeling drowsy and not getting anything done. Instead, I take a 25-minute nap. I get up and I'm good to go. So I'm completely refreshed and usually get some ideas there too, especially if it's later in the book.
How long did Pariah take to draft from start to finish? How long of a process is that?
A year and a half, probably. I slowed down on it a little because I probably would have finished it earlier, but my publisher said, we don't want to publish this in an election year. People will be too distracted for a book like this. So we don't want to publish it till 2025. So I thought, all right, I'll slow down a little. And
wow, they gave you extra time.
It's a dangerous thing to do with a writer, extend the deadline.
I know. So I slowed down, and I think that helped the book, actually.
Cory and I are both former book editors, and I cannot imagine a situation where I would say, you know what, take a little extra time.
Yeah, well, they don't have to pay you as soon either. So anyway.
That's true, yeah.
The financial reason.
Yeah. Sometimes you go and reread what you wrote earlier in the day and you think, oh, this really needs some work. And sometimes you read it and you think, this is a hell of a scene, or I really like this. And I get a double dose of that when I do the audio books. I really get excited doing a scene. I think, okay, this really worked. I'm reading it for the 19th time here and I still like it. So it must be okay. And the odd thing too is when you're done with it, and this intensive work when you're approaching the end and then you finish it. And about a week later, after you've turned it in, you really kind of miss it and you miss those characters. So I just got my editing letter and had a discussion with my editor on my current manuscript, which I turned in about a month and a half ago. And now I started on revisions, and it's really exciting to get back in with those characters and get reacquainted with them, because I really had gone through that same kind of withdrawal where it was like, it's don't have these people around every day anymore, and I kind of miss them. So now I'm back with them again and fixing things up a bit, and it's good to be there.
How important are your editor and agent in this process? What kind of feedback are they giving you that you find really helpful?
They're great. My agent is Ann Rittenberg. My editor is Edward Kastenmeier at Knopf. And they're both quite good. They're great at big picture stuff. They're not into line editing. That's for the copy editor. But, you'll say, like, this character needs a little more agency in this part of the book. That character, their backstory just doesn't interest me as much. Maybe do some cutting there, things like that. The book I just turned in is set in 2 different time periods. And they said, instead of having 2 flashbacks and 3 current periods, how about 3 flashbacks and 4 current periods, and break that first flashback section up so you get back to the present day action a little more quickly. And so I'm doing that as well. So, yeah. Are
these longer term relationships? Is this trust that you've built up over time?
I've worked with Edward on, I don't know how many books now, but I had kind of a gradual transition. My previous editor at Knopf was Sonny Mehta. Sort of a legendary figure in the field, and wonderful to work with. He was sort of this Sphinx-like character. You would go have lunch with him in New York, and Sonny was known for his silences. Would sit there with Sonny. When I first met him, I thought, does he just not like me? Does he have nothing? I eventually heard from everybody who worked for Sonny that was just Sonny's way. He would sit there and be contemplative and you weren't supposed to fill it with conversation. And fortunately, I didn't. And then he would come out with something quite helpful for you, and you would have lunch and talk about your book. And he was very old school in that way. Now, you have the editing letter, which is traditional, but you also have maybe a Zoom conversation. Before, it would always be you'd get a call from Sonny's assistant, and he says he'd like you to come up next week for lunch, and you'll talk about the book. And gradually, as Sonny got more and more duties as publisher of Knopf and Doubleday, he was just overwhelmed. He started, Edward would also go to those editing lunches, and they would sign him both be my editor, so that when Sonny passed away several years ago, it was an easy transition, and Edward just became my main editor.
Are you in touch with a lot of other spy thriller authors, Dan?
Yeah,
do you talk shop a lot?
We don't talk shop that much, but we run into each other at conferences and book festivals. I just had a great dinner with David McCloskey, really good spy writer, ex-CIA person. I had dinner with him in Miami, along with Tim Weiner, a New York Times former reporter who's written nonfiction histories of the CIA. And the three of us had a great dinner at Joe's Stone Crab in Miami, because I'd lived down there for a few years, so I remember that place, when we all were at the Miami Book Fair. So you see people like that, Ilana Berry, or I.S. Berry, who had a wonderful debut spy novel last year. I see her at events. I've had my wife and I have had dinner with her and her husband. Paul Vidic writes some really nice spy novels. Joseph Cannon, or Joe Cannon, in New York. Very pleasant guy, wonderful, funny guy, and met him and his wife. And so, yeah, we see each other out there, and we call upon each other to do in-conversation things at events when I'm in their city or they're in my city. So it's a great network of people. There's also a great website now called Spybrary. And it's got about 5,000 people in it, run by this great American Brit, Shane Whaley. And so they have a lot of good stuff. And it's become kind of a network where spy novelists and readers of those novels congregate online. So that's a good place too.
Have you gotten any good advice from any writers over the years?
It's not so much that. We don't really talk shop unless we're doing an event together and somebody asks us about it. When we do, and then we might bounce a few things back and forth. Where I have talked to them, like David McCloskey, for instance, his most recent book, The Persian, it was centered on the Israeli-Iran, espionage war. And, it came out, right, a lot of nutty stuff was happening with Iran. And so I shot him a note. I says, it's a great book, but you must be terrified, by events, because how do you keep pace with this shit if you're writing contemporary novels? And he ended up writing a piece for a British paper about, the perils of being a spy novel, writing stuff set in contemporary settings, because things are changing so fast and things are happening more irrationally than you can possibly imagine. So it is a dilemma. So that is one time where we kind of talk shop and through email. It was like, how do you deal with this stuff?
Yeah. There's a question I always mean to ask we've had a few horror writers and science fiction writers, and I always forget, but I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
Have you ever wanted to write a straight ahead, I don't even know, a non-thriller, a non-spy, something about a married couple or something like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, not really. It's sort of a real inner monologue type of relationship novel or something. No.
So sure.
Because like it was what I said earlier, I think you have so many great themes about humanity involved with spying. And I think that was just in reading interviews, and I did an interview once with John le Carré a long time ago, before I even wrote fiction. And it was those themes, even though he had worked in that world, I think it was those themes of betrayal and loyalty and identity, those three that captivated him more than anything. And that's what captivates me as well. It's just, you've got those three things, and what else do you really need? Love, loyalty, betrayal, identity. That's most of the human struggle right there.
Yeah. This is a good segue, Dan. We ask every author this. If you could hear any author dead or alive, talk about their process, how they write, their craft, who would you want it to be?
Well, I've heard Le Carré do it, and he's marvelous. I mean, the man speaks in complete, polished, edited paragraphs. It's just a thing to behold. But one I've never heard and never got to, I'd love to talk to Graham Greene, not just about his craft, but you mentioned, ever want to just write a more literary novel. He wrote both, even though there was always some suspense. Even in a great novel like The Comedians, there was a lot of suspense there, set in Haiti with these oddball characters he had, kind of united by circumstance. And The Quiet American, that was really a spy novel. And that one was not one he called an entertainment, as he called it. But so he was kind of torn between the idea of writing something that was a little more entertaining. And then, of course, when he wrote the ones that he called entertainments, he put just as much of his energy and his demanding standards imposed to that he did with anything. So I would love to have heard more from Graham Greene about how he made those decisions, how he decided what kind of book would be what.
For the last part, we will ask you some rapid fire questions, if you don't mind. And just the first thing that pops in your head, you don't have to think about these too much. What's one aspect of writing you think you're particularly good at?
I think setting, sense of place.
How about an aspect of writing you think you're bad at?
Villains. I would like to have a little better, well-rounded villains. And I think maybe one of the secrets to that is to offer a little bit less and keep them a bit more mysterious, a little more offstage sometimes.
Yeah.
They're more imposing if you don't see them as much.
What's harder to write, the first line or the last line?
First line.
What's the first thing you edit out of a draft?
Exposition. I get a little too enamored of describing some things or some places. I'll weave in these little stories that I picked up along the way, and sometimes they just don't fit.
What's a word you always misspell that autocorrect saves you?
God, and there is one, and I can't remember what it is. Maybe I blotted it from my memory. I just know that when I went through my other one with autocorrect, it was in there like 30 times. But now I can't remember what it was. I was like, Jesus, how did I do this? So anyway.
I like that you still plowed ahead with it. It was just like, all right, we're just going to fix this later.
Yeah, I mean, I turn off autocorrect while I'm writing because it just flags so much grammatical, sentence fragments that you might use for effect. And so I turn it off. And then when I go back through it, all those misspellings turn up.
That's really interesting. I've not heard of another author that does that.
I don't like all the red and blue and all that crap coming up while I'm writing. It's too distracting. Yeah.
And I was going to say, for a book like Pariah with a bunch of made up place names, it would drive it would drive it crazy. You'd have red lines everywhere.
You have to add all the words to the dictionary.
Yeah. So.
How many titles did Pariah go through, if any others, before landing on the final? And are there any that you want to share with us that you were close to going with?
I started with Pariah. And then when I turned it in, I said, look, I'm not so sure about this. So we brainstormed, and it was a big mistake because then we brainstormed, and my editor and my agent, and they came up with ideas they liked, but I didn't like. And my other ideas, speaking of Graham Greene, two things that were both sort of Greene-esque. One was Our Man in Bolrovia, which was reminiscent of Our Man in Havana.
Yep.
The other, and now I'm not going to be able to think of the other one, which was sort of a Graham Greene type of title. But anyway, we came up with several. And finally, at the end, we were about to go with another one. And I woke up one morning and said, I really don't like that. And I sent them a message, said, I don't like this. Let's just go back to Pariah. And they said, good. So it was fine.
Your original gut instinct was right.
Yeah, I guess it was. We'll never know.
Do you write in
Microsoft? The other one was The Comedian.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Yeah.
You had The Comedians, but this was The Comedian. So that was the other title. So anyway.
I mean, all three of those are great choices. Our Man in Bolrovia, The Comedian, and Pariah. I think any one of them would have done the trick.
Yeah.
Do you write in, I'm guessing Microsoft Word from the red and blue, Google Docs, longhand Word?
I do a lot in longhand. While I have stuff on the screen, something will occur to me. I don't want to type it on that. And I work on legal pads. and I'll just turn and I'll scribble. I mean, I can show you. I've got all this revision work. I've got
Oh yeah, look at that.
this stuff and all this tons of junk that I'm going through on my current manuscript. So a lot on legal pads, and then some of it I'll transcribe, some I'll just put straight into the text. So.
Is that a leftover from your reporting days?
Probably, or a leftover from college. I was writing papers. I'd write it all out in longhand first. So.
Do you keep that stuff for the archives, or do you just throw it away when you're done?
I keep a lot of it, and I throw away some. I mean, it depends. Some of it I keep just to have around if I need to consult it later.
Yeah. When you're writing, Dan, do you have music, TV, radio on in the background? Do you have to write with silence?
I write with silence. If I had music on, I would just zone out.
Yeah, me too.
What's your go-to procrastination method?
Checking sports stuff online and checking, email, just all that online shit that I know Mick Herron, that writes the Slow Horses novels, and he has a little office that he goes to, which is not internet capable. And I think that's a hell of a good idea because, he'll might have that inclination to go online and you can't. So it's a good idea. So that's my biggest procrastination method, is doing that. And then after lunch, doing too many of the games on the New York Times site instead of going right back to work.
Right. That's a dangerous one. And I have definitely heard of a lot of other authors that basically have to set up a bit of a black box.
Yeah. And if it's the morning after a huge sports event that got me extremely excited, like, say, Carolina just beat Duke or something in basketball, I'll spend 2 hours, looking at replays and shit. So that's really destructive. March Madness, I take a day off and watch the first round. It's that kind of thing.
Dan, that's all the questions we have for you today.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thank you so
we really
much
appreciate
for
you coming on. This was really cool to hear about your process.
Well, thanks. It was fun to talk about.